Hey, welcome to this radio video. This is the Solar Activity Propagation Report number 8 for July 31st, 2014. So what's happening and what happened with propagation in the sun? Well, in the past week, we've enjoyed some pretty cool propagation. Solar flux steadily increased. If we look at the numbers this morning, solar flux is 152, and that's not bad at all. K index stayed pretty much in the 1, 2 range. This is good because it means that geomagnetic field was quiet and propagation was quite good. And actually, I've done some listening this week. Australia and New Zealand booming in, even on the 16-meter band, 17795 for Australia this week on several evenings, so showing that actually high frequency propagation is actually not bad at all. And pretty much everything I listened to had great signals. Albania in the evening around 0230, 0130, I believe. Vietnam from Great Britain, and of course 0400 hours. Radio New Zealand was good. Australia coming in on many 19-meter band frequencies around 0400, 15160, 15240, 15300 were frequencies where I've heard Australia actually. And so solar flux steadily increased thanks to the apparition of a lot of sunspots. Here is what the sun looks like actually right now. Let's make it a little smaller. So you got these little sunspots here on the right side and on the left side. The ones on the left side are actually rotating towards us. So it will probably give us some great propagation because solar flux will probably increase a little bit more as we get these sunspots. And actually, some of the predictions are giving us solar flux that will go to about 170, 75. Let's hope so. In the past week, propagation was great. Only maybe on Sunday to Monday, there was a little bit of disturbance just because there was the solar wind was a little faster than usual, and actually there was a little bit of aurora borealis happening in the night of Sunday to Monday. But apart from that, nothing much. Propagation was good. Things are quiet. That could change because sunspot 2130 is the one that we need to check for. First of all, because it now is really good for M flares and even the very powerful X flares. And what's happening is that this 2130 is rotating towards the solar disk, towards the center of the disk. And what's going to happen is that once they reach this area or close to it, any flares that might actually happen on those on this sunspot, especially 2130, will become what we call geo-effective. That means that any flare will release a coronal mass ejection or a cloud of particles that will be earth directed. So that could actually make propagation a little worse because of geomagnetic effects of that. And also, if there are flares, when a flare erupts, usually we have an hour or two where propagation on the sunlit side of Earth actually goes down to zero on the HF bands for an hour or two and slowly comes back because as the solar flare goes on, there's an immediate effect of solar radiation that actually lowers the capability of the ionosphere to reflect signals. But that is very short-lived, half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours max. So if you are listening to signals in the daytime and you see that they suddenly disappear, there could have been a flare on the sun. One thing to check for in the coming week, first of all, there was a coronal mass ejection. There was a big filament of magnetism that was floating kind of on the surface of the sun. And here on that video that you see here, you see that it collapsed and created a gas, a cloud of particles that is expanding in space. Now, most of the cloud seems to be going north, so it's going to miss us because it's going to pass north of the Earth in space. But we expect that there might be just the border of the cloud might actually touch our planet, which means that in this weekend there might be some unsettled conditions with this. So we're not really sure, but there could be a possibility of unsettled conditions because of this. The other thing to check for, like I said, is the sunspot 2130. 2130 actually had an M flare this morning at 11:14 UTC, M2.5. So these are moderate flares, and usually when we get into the M flares, and especially if the numbers in the M flares come bigger, M7, M8, M9, then we are getting into some stronger propagation. We also look at the luminosity here. You see that there seems to be some really active magnetism that's coming into view. So I expect solar flux to really continue getting higher and higher as the week will progress next week and until our next report. But we are looking at possibility of more unsettled conditions because of solar flares and also that little cloud of expanding gas that actually might be reaching Earth. So enjoy good propagation as long as we're not too much affected by these. If you want to, of course, check it out, because that's the best way to know. If you find that propagation isn't that great, just go to dx.qsl.net, check these numbers. These are the really important numbers, updated every 3 hours. Actually, the solar flux is updated once every 24 hours, but the A and K index are updated every 3 hours. So the rule, as long as the K index is below 3, 2 or less, pretty good. The A index is an average of the 24 hours of the K index. So if the K index gets higher, well, this A index actually gets higher. Of course, you can check the color-coded numbers because these become yellow and red if conditions really get worse. Predicted solar flares, solar flares, yes, in the next few days. And of course, solar flux should get higher and higher. I'm expecting it to probably go to 170 and even 180 maybe for next week, which will be good as long as we don't have too many flares. If we do have flares, that could really make propagation a little disturbed here. So here on the graph, we could see the solar flare that made these little spikes here. And you see there's a lot of little spikes. There's a lot of stuff happening on the sun. You can see it on this graph here. Propagation into the high frequencies will be good. Even the 10-meter band should be open. At 100, usually at more than 100, 120, 10-meter band is open most of the time. So check out propagation up to 30 megahertz. And even, at 150, a little more. I've been checking 50 megahertz, a 6-meter amateur radio band. And last night there was some propagation, but it was more sporadic E-skip. But transatlantic conditions might actually be on if the solar flux gets higher than 160, 70. That's something to check for. Another indication this morning, I did listen to the full hour of KBS World Radio 15575 in English at 1300. Great signal, S7, S8, peaking sometimes at S9, which is typical and very nice in propagation towards Montreal. So conditions are great, and the only thing that really could destroy that will be solar flares coming in the next few days. So once again, I want to point that you should check out all this information. spaceweather.com, great, great news source of what's happening in our with our sun and with geomagnetic conditions. dx.qsl.net for the latest index of solar flux. By the way, you can also listen to this information updated once daily at 2100 hours UTC on WWV 10, 15, 20 megahertz. 18 minutes past the hour, they give the solar flux and the K index. And solarham.net, another great source of what's happening with our sun and our geomagnetic field. So hopefully we will not have too many flares and good conditions. If a solar flare should actually come in from sunspot 2130 or any other sunspots, because even though other sunspots are not sometimes predicted to flare, they could. You never know on the sun. There's kind of an unpredictable part of it here. Then, of course, there will be blackouts at the moment of the flare, and a few days later there could be some unsettled conditions. So check for possible unsettled conditions this weekend. If that CME is missing us, then we should have great propagation. And next week, if 2130 flares up, could be unsettled. If it stays quiet, then we probably will have some great propagation also, thanks to the higher solar flux. Hope you enjoy these reports every week, and I've got some really positive and great comments, so thank you all. And check out these great websites for up-to-date everyday news on what's happening. Have great shortwave listening, and hope that you can DX those rare countries, and that you'll have fun with your radio. So this was the solar propagation or solar activity and propagation report number 8 for July 31st, 2014. 73s, and hope to see you on the channel. Bye-bye.